Mastering the American Dream, the Cuban Triad for Triumphant Success. Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Emilio Justo, and today I'm deeply honored to share with you not only the insights from my professional journey, but also the personal philosophies that have shaped my life and contributed to my success. As a Cuban refugee, an eye surgeon, a two-time international TEDx speaker, and the best-selling author of The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success, I stand before you as a living testament to the power of self-discipline, resilience, and delayed gratification in achieving the American dream. Let me begin with my childhood. I was born in Cuba, a beautiful country under the shadow of Fidel Castro's oppressive regime. How oppressive, you might ask? Well, let me share with you some examples. First, when Fidel Castro took control of Cuba, one of the first things he did was to mandate to the general public to go to their local bank and trade in their money for a new currency that Fidel had created. Of course, this new currency was essentially worthless, as Fidel wanted the existing currency in cash to maintain his revolution. My father, who always distrusted Castro, instead chose to bury his money in the backyard. Yes, digging a hole was more important for my father than trading in his money at a bank surrounded by soldiers with machine guns. Second, when Castro took control, he took control of all private property, both homes and businesses. Our meager home was taken from us and subdivided so as to house several families in one house. A complete inventory was taken of every single piece of property owned, such as silverware, dishes, and the like. My father owned a small shoe store named the Peleteria California, which means the California shoe store. One evening, around 6 p.m., after he had closed and locked the front door, he heard a loud banging at the front door. When he approached the door, he saw through the window armed soldiers with machine guns. Okay, so now what? If you had been my father, what would you have done? Well, my father felt compelled to open the door, at which time the soldiers pointed the machine guns to his face and demanded the keys to the store. It was as simple and short as I'm telling you. In the blink of an eye, my father lost his business to communism. Third, fast forward a couple of months, and my father was sitting with his cousin and a friend in the outdoor plaza of the town square. Fidel was very paranoid of any uprising against him, so he used a strong hand to keep the citizens from congregating together for fear of people ganging up together to create an uprising. A jeep with soldiers strolled through the town square and started firing a barrage of bullets to disseminate any groups of people congregating. Again, in the blink of an eye, my father's cousin, who was sitting next to him, was gunned down by Castro's men. My parents, determined to escape the shackles of communism, made the courageous decision to flee Cuba and immigrate to the United States. Remember that cash that my father had buried in the backyard? Well, it turns out that my father befriended a Canadian diplomat and used this old valuable currency to purchase airline tickets on the black market out of Cuba through Mexico. But it wasn't quite that easy. In preparation for our departure, Castro's troops came to our small home and did a full inventory of all of our belongings. Remember that initial inventory of silverware, plates, and dishes? Yep. In order to leave the country, the inventory had to match exactly. Had we broken a plate or lost a fork, we would have been forced to remain in Cuba. Additionally, no earthly possessions were allowed to be taken other than the clothes on our backs. Can you believe this? I was just a child, but even then I understood the gravity of leaving everything we knew behind in search of freedom and opportunity. The journey was fraught with uncertainty and peril, but observing my parents instilled in me a profound sense of resilience and determination. In Winston Churchill's own words, success is not final, failure is not fatal, it is the courage to continue that counts. After 6 months in Mexico, church organizations were sponsoring Cuban refugees' entry into the United States. And our family ended up in Gary, Indiana. My grandparents fled Cuba a few months later and settled in Tarkio, Missouri, on a small college campus. My father worked 2 full-time jobs, and my mother temporarily moved 3 hours away to Indiana University to study all over again after having received her doctorate in education in Havana. I was sent nearly 1,000 miles away to grow up with my grandparents on the campus of Tarkio College, living in a small 800-foot dorm apartment. What would you have done with your only child in these same circumstances? Would you have sent your child away, or would you have kept your child with you? My parents made the very difficult decision to sacrifice their only child for 5 years in an effort to establish themselves to build a better life for me in the long run. Boy, talk about delayed gratification. I think Brian Tracy encapsulates it beautifully when he says, the ability to discipline yourself to delay gratification in the short term in order to enjoy greater rewards in the long term is the indispensable prerequisite for success. While being constantly surrounded by college students in Tarkio was exhilarating, it was also stressful learning a new language and culture while resisting discrimination and poverty. Some of my so-called friends made fun of my grandparents for their accents and lack of fluency in English. After growing up in Tarkio from kindergarten through 4th grade, we moved back to Indiana for 5th grade after my parents had saved enough money to purchase a home in Crown Point, just a few minutes south of Gary. My father now only needed one job as a steelworker, and my mother taught high school Spanish. Now, fast forward to my teenage years, we had settled in America, and I was determined to make the most of the opportunities that lay before me. However, life in a new country wasn't always easy, yet my parents' unwavering belief in the American dream inspired me to persevere. Using my own mantra, which I call the Cuban Triad, a combination of self-discipline, resilience, and delayed gratification, these principles have illuminated my path forward and been my guiding stars toward success. When we arrived in the United States, we had nothing but hope and a burning desire to succeed. Self-discipline was essential for me as I navigated the challenges of a new country, learned a new language, and pursued my education. Whether it was pulling an all-nighter in high school to study or working late into the night to perfect my surgical skills, self-discipline kept me focused on my goals. Now, as you listen to this next story, think for a moment of one of your biggest life challenges and how you responded to it. Did you do your best at the time, or would you have done things differently? One vivid memory that stands out is from my early days in medical school. The workload was immense and the pressure was overwhelming at times. One of my best friends at Michigan called me late Sunday afternoon with tickets to a concert that night, and I had to study for a gross anatomy test the next morning. And it was a Beach Boys concert too. Oh my gosh, what do I do? Well, I told my friend that I appreciated the invitation, but had to study. My friend said, Ah, don't worry, you're smart, you'll do just fine. Really? I said. I know there isn't a chance in hell that I'm going to pass this test without several hours of memorization tonight. This little episode reminds me of what the late, great Jim Rohn preached. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Self-discipline is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. And I always dug deep and found the strength to push through regardless of the challenges. The second component of the Cuban Triad is resilience, fueled by an almost obsessive drive to succeed. Resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, while obsession is an intense focus on a particular goal. Together, they create an unstoppable force. In my second TEDx talk, Unleashing the Drive Within, the Obsession Advantage to Unprecedented Success, I discuss how an obsessive drive can propel you forward even when faced with seemingly insurmountable obstacles. In this talk, I changed the paradigm from one of a negative connotation of obsession to a very positive one. This new obsession is not about unhealthy fixation, but rather a passionate commitment to your goals. My resilience as a teenager and an adult was tested time and time again. From facing economic hardships to encountering professional setbacks, the road to success has been anything but smooth. However, I learned that setbacks are merely temporary steps back and that progression requires obsession. Every failure was an opportunity to learn and grow. Do you agree? Think back to a time that you failed or simply didn't achieve what you set out for. How did you handle the disappointment? Were you able to bounce back, or did it totally bury you? The one challenge early in my youth that resonates the most with me was midway through my freshman year in high school when I developed one of the most severe cases of acne conglobata known in the medical literature. Every day I would sit in the classroom literally with pus running down my face. Oh, how embarrassing. It was so severe that I had a persistent fever for over a month and was hospitalized at Northwestern University, searching for a cause. Could it be related to some cancer in my body? Was I slowly dying? Ultimately, it was determined that the draining pus pockets in my face were the cause of my so-called fever of unknown origin. Notwithstanding this setback, I embraced resilience and obsession, focusing intensely on my studies while lying in bed in a hospital room. 2 months and 3 surgeries later, I was finally discharged home, free of fever, but my face scarred forever. As Confucius said, the greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. This relentless pursuit of excellence led me to be active in athletics and school clubs, and ultimately become the valedictorian of my high school graduating class, a testament to the power of hard work and dedication. The funny thing is that I was so naive as a teenager that halfway through my senior year of high school, one of my friends told me that, hey, I might end up being valedictorian. And you know what my response was? What's a valedictorian? Oh, I felt pretty stupid when I asked that question. Resilience and obsession are like a dynamic duo. Think of them as Batman and Robin fighting off the villains of doubt and fear. Just remember, Batman never quits and neither should you. The final pillar of my Cuban Triad is delayed gratification. This is the ability to resist the temptation of an immediate reward in favor of a later, often greater reward. This principle, in my opinion, is crucial for achieving sustained success. Delayed gratification has played a pivotal role in my life. From my early days in medical school to building a thriving practice, I've always prioritized long-term goals over short-term pleasures. I vividly recall the Stanford marshmallow experiment, which I discussed in my first TEDx titled Delayed Gratification, Your Superpower to Success. In this experiment, children were given a choice: eat one marshmallow now or wait 15 minutes and get 2 marshmallows. The children who waited ended up achieving higher levels of success many years later. This marshmallow study demonstrated that children who could delay gratification were more likely to succeed in various aspects of life, including academics and personal relationships. Just remember that teaching children the value of patience and long-term rewards will set them up for success in all aspects of life. When I was at the University of Michigan, I always purchased season football tickets like most students. And for those of you who don't know, the Michigan Wolverines are one of the elite blue blood programs in college football. I remember I would purchase a 6-pack of season tickets for only $36, the student price for end zone tickets. However, I didn't have much money in those college days and had tons of student loans. I consciously chose not to attend the football games and instead scout my tickets. Wow, I could turn a $6 ticket into $50. I then used the profit to be able to buy pizza on the weekends and attend an occasional concert. The ironic thing about this story is that now I fly to Michigan twice a year with my family to go to football games and sit on the 50-yard line. My, if this isn't delayed gratification at its best. You know, I'll never forget a quote that I heard early in my adult life. Good things come to those who wait, but better things come to those who work for it. As we wrap up the Cuban triad of self-discipline, resilience, and delayed gratification, this has been instrumental in my journey from a Cuban refugee to a successful surgeon, entrepreneur, and thought leader. These principles have helped me overcome challenges, achieve long-term success, and lead a fulfilling life. I encourage you to embrace this trilogy in your own life. By developing self-discipline, cultivating resilience, and practicing delayed gratification, you too can turn setbacks into opportunities, achieve your highest aspirations, and live a life of purpose and fulfillment. I invite you to embrace the Cuban triad, harness those extraordinary attributes, and discover the extraordinary potential within you. Will you heed the transformative superpowers of this Cuban triad? The choice is yours.